So what you've got to understand about me is that I really am not into memorabilia at all. I just don't, it just doesn't, I like, it's particularly sort of rock memorabilia and things like that. Yeah, you know, if you gave me Napoleon's hat, I might get really excited. But I just sort of, it's just, I know maybe it sounds like I'm a bit of a party pooper, but I just can't get sort of that excited about things. I'm much more excited about music and events and actual happenings. You know, I suppose if I could afford things like John Lennon's lyrics and that, maybe I'd love to have that. But it's sort of, I don't know, they always seem like not as good as the real thing, which is the performance and the actual song itself. I have one single piece of rock memorabilia. And what it is a photograph of Jimi Hendrix. It's taken, I think it was in 1969, by an English photographer called Gerard Mankiewicz. But the photograph I have, it's a framed shot. It's the only one that exists. There's no copies of it. It was reproduced, I think, maybe in magazines, but I have the only print. It's him wearing his very famous hussar's jacket, you know, the one with all the brocade upon it, and he's just looking straight at the camera with that kind of funny face that he had, like. Jimi Hendrix had a kind of squashed-looking face to me, but he looks amazing. It's an amazing photograph from an amazing session, and I bought it at a charity auction in London many years ago. I can't remember how much I paid for it. Don't know what it's worth now, but I really love it because it's just a really iconic view of Jimi Hendrix, the great Jimi Hendrix.
Well, recently I dug out of a box of vinyl albums a copy of Queen's album, A Kind of Magic, that is autographed by all the band members, and which I had them do for me at the time of the release of the album. And it's not their greatest album, but I remember spending quite a lot of time with the band when they were working on that album, and I was quite privileged to visit them in the studio when they were working on it. And you know, they've remained one of the great inspirations in my life, Queen. I really miss Freddie, of course, as would, you know, anybody that loves music. And it just reminds me of a time where I was fortunate enough to be close to them as a band and to see into their world for just a little moment.
As I collect far too many things, I'm sure I probably have a number of pieces of memorabilia or items that could be considered memorabilia that I have stashed away somewhere. I think the one that comes to mind that probably is of some relevance to being younger and certainly to Duran Duran is a movie poster that I have that I got very early on after we'd started the band, and it's an original US poster for the movie Barbarella, which, as I'm sure many listeners would know, was the movie we took our name from. And somehow that imagery from the movie, the crazy 60s sci-fi, Jane Fonda, dear departed Anita Pallenberg, and our angel Pygar, really represented something fantastical, something futuristic, something slightly kitsch, something completely mad. that inspired us to use the name Duran Duran, and it's still an inspiration. The poster is great. It's a fantastic aesthetic. People have been talking about remaking the movie for so many years. We've actually been approached several times about potentially being involved for a soundtrack or something, but the movies have never quite happened. And I believe that the reason they haven't is because the original Barbarella is a true cult classic, and it would be extremely hard to make a beautiful modern version that was anywhere near as compelling and strangely beautiful as the original movie. That doesn't mean that it'll stop Hollywood eventually, because they've certainly made a mess of plenty of classic movies, but this poster is still there. It's not actually on a wall, it's folded up, because it was one of those sort of beautiful, thin, 8-sheet posters that were folded. But I know exactly where it is, which with most of my things like that, I don't. So, of all the treasures, that's one of the ones. Well, certainly today's one. We could do this for 365 days probably, but that's something that I've definitely kept for a long time.
Yeah, when I was in my teens, I really got into punk. I was a big fan of punk rock, and one of my favorite bands was Generation X, and more commonly known as the band that had Billy Idol as their singer. And I loved their first record, which was called Your Generation. And I found out that they were coming to Birmingham and they were going to go into the local Virgin record store. So I brought along my copy of Your Generation, and I got to meet Billy Idol. I think I was 17 at the time. And I got to meet Billy Idol and Tony James, and they were very gracious, and they signed my record and kind of gave me a pat on the head. And I've kept that piece of memorabilia ever since. It was very important. It was about 2 years before I joined Duran. But I would say Generation X were a very big part of my growing up and very influential. I loved the way they dressed. I loved the image of the band across the board. I liked their music. So that was a big moment for me, meeting those guys. And to this day, they probably never knew that it was me.